Becoming a four-time NCAA champion in wrestling is one of the most incredible accomplishments. It's one of the most revered things you can do in the sport of wrestling. It's one of the most exclusive lists. And it's exclusive because it's really, really hard to do, right? You know, Pat Smith, Cael Sanderson, Kyle Dake, Logan Stieber, Yanni Diakomahalis are the five who have been able to achieve 4 NCAA titles in Division I wrestling. But I believe there's one person who was so close, maybe one set of circumstances, one decision, maybe wrestling at a slightly different time away from actually being on that list, and a list would then be 6. And I'm talking about a wrestler who who placed 5th as a freshman. And so you might think, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. If you're 5th as a freshman, you weren't really that close. And I'm with you, but let me explain here. And I'm talking about Zane Rutherford, Penn State great Zane Rutherford. Now, here's why I think he was one of the closest to attaining 4-time status. If you go back, he was a huge, huge recruit coming out of Pennsylvania. Iowa was all over him. Penn State was all over him. He was a cadet world champion. Everyone wanted to get this guy, right? He ultimately decides to go to Penn State, and he went on to have an incredible career. But at this point in time, everyone knew he would be good. The question was how good. And now another thing that's important context is understanding just how tight these team races were back then. Now we're seeing Penn State's kind of locking it up on Friday of NCAAs. It wasn't always like that for Coach Sanderson and company. In 2013, it was really close. 2014 was actually ultimately a very close team race. 2011, they won Big Tens by 1 match, right? They were losing duels. So very, very competitive, right? And so Penn State is looking at the team race, and they're like, we're probably going to need Zane, and we're not going to be able to wait. We're going to need him this year right away. So the decision is made to wrestle Zane right away. And if you look at some of these teams, particularly Minnesota, where they're rolling out Thorne, 2 Dardanes, Dylan Ness, Logan Storley, Schiller, Tony Nelson, a 2-time champ. It was a nasty, nasty team. And Penn State said, man, we're gonna need to throw everyone at this squad in order to win. And that ultimately was correct. So they make the decision, all right, we're wrestling Zane. We're wrestling him right away. So once he's out there, you're thinking, okay, this is someone he can probably contribute points. He's probably a point scoring guy. Someone who's going to qualify, he could probably place, right? Well, in the first semester of his true freshman year, Zane Rutherford takes out Logan Stieber. A monumental upset, a huge upset. One of the most least predicted upsets I think there have ever been, right? No one saw this coming, and especially me. If you can dig up the article, you'll see I could not have been more wrong about this match. I was giving no shot, no opportunity for Zane Rutherford to pull off this match against Logan Stieber, who was he was a 4-time NCAA champion ultimately. He was one of the most dominant bonus point scorers. This is a junior, a redshirt junior going against a true freshman. This guy was wrestling in high school, 6 months ago, and now he's beating Logan Stieber, but it happened. It happened. So then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, this kid is not just good, he's next level. So his season continues on. Logan Stieber gets right. He figures out Zane Rutherford. He beats him, and Zane ultimately places 5th at NCAAs that year. But his points, had he not scored those points at NCAAs in 2014, they don't win the tournament. It's Minnesota, right? That's what it would have been. But they made the right call. They used Zane, and they needed every point they could come up with. And at NCAAs, he lost to Logan, and then he lost to Mitchell Port in a crazy tiebreaker match. And that would be the last time he would experience defeat in college wrestling. So after this point in time, then we enter the legendary Penn State punt year, where in 2015, they redshirted Nico Megaludis, Jason Nolf, Bo Nickel, and Zane Rutherford. All 4 of those guys redshirted. Obviously, a lot of points. All those guys were national champions, right? So a lot of points left there so they could set up what ultimately became another incredible run of another 4-peat for Coach Sanderson. So during that redshirt year, Zane Rutherford, he wrestled a lot of freestyle. I don't think he did a single folk style match. He wrestled some freestyle. He trained. He got a little bit bigger, and he transformed into an otherworldly bonus point scorer, okay? And what is also helpful context is looking at that 2015 season. Who was at 149 pounds? Who would have been in Zane's way, potentially? Well, the champion was Drake Haldeshell. The runner-up was Dave Habit. And those guys were, they didn't go on to do, or Drake didn't really wrestle much freestyle afterwards. Drake was a beast, no doubt about it. But it doesn't take a big stretch of the imagination to figure that a redshirt freshman, Zane Rutherford, who had already beaten Logan Stieber, could probably have won that tournament and beaten Drake Haldeshell, right? It's not a stretch. In fact, it would have been pretty predictable that Zane would have won at that point in time. But that wasn't the reality. The decision was made to redshirt him and a ton of other Penn State guys. And then you look at what happens afterwards, it's like, oh my gosh, obviously the right call, right? Because this guy goes on to have, what I will say, 3 straight Hodge seasons, certainly 3 straight Hodge-worthy seasons. Now, he won 2 his junior and senior year, but if you look at his sophomore year, how dominant he was, how many pins he got, how much he bonused All-Americans, he statistically was the best, but he didn't ultimately win. They gave it to a senior Alex Daringer, who, absolute legend. No huge gripes, but if you look at the numbers, and any FRL listener is like, oh, wow, CP's talking about the 2016 Hodge race again. I don't know why I can't get off it. I don't know, but it just comes up a lot. So just indulge me, if you will. But if you look back at the numbers, I think it was pretty clear Zane had a more dominant year. That being said, you look at the run he goes on from basically fall of 2015 through his senior year, it's otherworldly. And look at some of these NCAA tournaments he had. So in 2016, he goes Tech, pins Pat Lugo, pins Alec Pantelio in the semis, and then a 10-1 over Sorensen in the NCAA finals. That's an NCAA tournament. Tech, pin, major at the NCAAs. Then the next year, his would have been his junior year, right? He goes Tech, pin of Brandon Sorensen, and then Tech in the finals. And this was the infamous 5-peat year or 5-champ year for Penn State, where they won 49, 57, 65, 74, 84 all in a row in 2017. Just an incredible thing to see. So he reached a level of dominance that was absolutely incredible. Okay, he won 3 straight NCAAs, undefeated. And I think if the circumstances are different, if the team dynamics were a little bit different, if the timing was just slightly adjusted, that Zane Rutherford not only would be a 4-time national champion, joining that elite list of 5, I think he would have become the 2nd undefeated 4-time national champion.